Jake Callahan rode into Dust Creek just after sunrise, when the sky was painted with soft pink and gold colors. The town was small, the kind of place where every building seemed tired from the years of sun and wind. Jake had been there only a few times before, mostly to buy supplies or rest his horse. He was a quiet cowboy, known more for helping strangers than for talking about himself. People trusted him because he always kept his word, and because he treated everyone kindly. That morning, Jake planned to stay in town only long enough to buy flour, coffee, and a few tools for his ranch. He wanted to get back before nightfall. But as he rode down the main street, he noticed something unusual. A gathering of people near the old wooden stage. Men stood in a loose circle, whispering, pointing, and exchanging looks. Jake slowed his horse. Normally, Dust Creek was calm at that hour. Seeing a crowd so early made him curious. He guided his horse closer, trying to understand what was happening. At first, he saw only the backs of the townspeople. Then the crowd shifted, and Jake's expression changed. On the stage, a few travelers were standing in a line, looking tired and dusty. Their clothes were worn, and their hands were tied with rough rope. Among them stood a young Apache woman with long, dark hair, her chin raised despite her weariness. Her eyes were calm, almost too calm for someone in her situation. Jake felt his chest tighten. He knew the region well, and he knew the laws even better. Whatever this was, it was not legal. Dust Creek was far from perfect, but the town did not allow people to be treated like property. Jake's first thought was that something very wrong had happened before he arrived, and now he had walked right into the middle of it. He got off his horse and tied it to a post. The wooden boards creaked under his boots as he stepped closer. A man in a dusty hat stood on the stage, speaking loudly and waving his arms. He looked proud of himself, though Jake did not understand why. "Ladies and gentlemen," the man said, "these travelers were found wandering in the desert. They need new homes, new direction. We're offering them a chance to start fresh." Jake frowned. Something about the man's smile felt false. The people on stage did not look like volunteers seeking new opportunities. They looked like they had been taken against their will. Their eyes were anxious, their shoulders tense. Jake scanned the crowd. Most of the townspeople also seemed unsure. A few whispered to each other, perhaps uneasy about what was happening. No one stepped forward to question it, though. No one wanted trouble. Jake let out a slow breath. He was not a man who searched for trouble, but he also could not ignore it when it stood right in front of him. His eyes returned to the young Apache woman. She stood taller than the others, even though her hands were tied. There was a stillness about her, a quiet strength he could feel even from a distance. She did not appear afraid. Instead, she seemed to be watching everything carefully, taking in each detail. When her gaze swept over the crowd, it felt sharp and thoughtful. Jake felt something stir inside him. Not attraction, not pity, but a deep sense of responsibility. He had seen unfair situations before. But something about this moment felt heavier, as if he had arrived at exactly the time he was supposed to. The man on the stage continued talking while Jake tried to decide what to do. Jake had always believed in treating people fairly. The idea of letting innocent travelers be taken away without understanding what was really going on troubled him deeply. But stepping forward without a plan could make things worse. He stood silently, thinking, until he heard a quiet voice beside him. "Strange sight, isn't it?" an older shopkeeper said, shaking his head. "Came out of nowhere. Folks don't know what to make of it." "Where did they come from?" Jake asked. "No one knows," the shopkeeper replied. "Couple of men brought them here before sunrise, claimed they found them alone out in the desert. I've lived here 30 years and never seen anything like this." Jake nodded, though his mind was racing. He did not believe the men's story for a second. Things were not adding up. Travelers found wandering in a group, brought to town tied up, and then offered to strangers? Nothing about it sounded honest. The sun climbed higher, warming the air. Jake stepped closer to the stage. The Apache woman noticed him. Their eyes met for a brief moment. Her gaze was steady, not pleading, and Jake felt it speak more than words. She seemed to be telling him something silently, not asking for rescue, but showing that she knew what was happening and that she would handle herself with dignity no matter what came next. Jake had always admired courage. In that moment, he could see it shining in her face. The man on the stage clapped his hands loudly, breaking the tense quiet. "All right now," he shouted. "Let's begin. Who wants to make the first offer?" The crowd shifted uncomfortably. No one stepped forward. Jake could sense that most townspeople did not want any part of this. They were curious, but not enough to involve themselves. Jake's jaw tightened as he watched the man grow impatient. The scene felt wrong, deeply wrong, but confronting the man publicly could cause trouble for the captured people. Jake needed a way to get them away from the situation without making things worse. He thought fast, weighing his choices. He remembered something the marshal of a nearby town once told him. "Sometimes you can stop a bad situation quietly without shouting. You just need to be smart about it." Jake decided he would intervene, but calmly, carefully. If he acted boldly but gently, perhaps he could prevent harm. He stepped forward slowly, making sure not to alarm anyone. His voice was calm, steady. "I'll take one," he said. The crowd turned toward him. The man on the stage brightened instantly, thinking he had made a sale, but Jake's eyes were on the Apache woman. Her expression did not change, but he felt her watching him closely. The man rubbed his hands together and said, "Good choice, sir. She's the finest among them. Strong, quiet, cooperative." Jake didn't react. He simply nodded and said, "Untie her. I paid. She comes with me now." The man hesitated. Jake's calm voice carried a firmness that left no room for argument. The man motioned for one of his companions to loosen the rope binding her wrists. The Apache woman flexed her hands when the rope fell away, but she did not run. She simply stepped off the stage and stood beside Jake. Jake didn't touch her or speak loudly. He respected her space. Instead, he glanced at her and said softly, "Let's go." She gave a small nod, calm, controlled, and thoughtful. Jake led her away from the crowd, toward his horse. Every step felt heavy, as if the whole town was holding its breath. People watched with wide eyes, unsure of what would happen next. The Apache woman walked with steady steps, her back straight. When they reached the horse, Jake untied the reins and gently held them in his hands. He looked around to make sure no one was following. The crowd remained near the stage, still uncertain, still confused. Jake turned to her and spoke in a low voice meant only for her. "You're free," he said. "You don't owe me anything. I only stepped in because I didn't want them to take you anywhere else." For the first time, her expression softened. Not a smile, just a slight change in her eyes, a quiet acknowledgement. Jake knew there was more to the story than what he had seen. He knew she had a family somewhere, a home, a life, before all this. He also knew she might not trust him yet. So he said, "If you want, I can help you get somewhere safe. You can choose." She studied him for a long moment, looking for any sign of falsehood. Jake met her gaze without flinching. He meant every word. Finally, she nodded once, slow, deliberate. Jake relaxed slightly. He felt he had made the right choice. The morning sun warmed the streets of Dust Creek as the two of them stepped forward together, leaving the stage and the uneasy crowd behind. But even as they walked away, Jake sensed the story was only beginning. He did not know where their path would lead, but he knew one thing with certainty. He had arrived in Dust Creek expecting only to buy supplies. Instead, fate had placed a stranger in his care, a stranger with strength, mystery, and a future that would soon intertwine with his own in ways he couldn't yet imagine. Jake and the young Apache woman walked away from Dust Creek slowly, as if neither of them wished to rush the moment. The town behind them grew quieter with every step. The morning sun shone warmly on the dusty road, and the wooden buildings cast long shadows. Jake held the reins of his horse, and she walked a few steps behind him, calm and thoughtful. For a while, neither spoke. Jake did not want to pressure her. He knew she needed space to breathe and understand where she stood now. He also needed a moment to understand the situation himself. He had stepped into something he still didn't fully comprehend. After they reached the edge of town, Jake stopped beside a small patch of shade from a mesquite tree. He turned around gently. "My name's Jake," he said in a soft voice, careful not to overwhelm her. "Jake Callahan." The woman looked at him with steady eyes. She seemed to consider whether she wanted to share her name. Then she spoke softly, her voice clear though quiet. "Ayanna." Jake nodded politely, as if receiving an important message. "Nice to meet you, Ayanna." She didn't smile, but her expression softened slightly, as if she appreciated being spoken to with respect instead of haste or authority. Jake glanced around. The outskirts of Dust Creek were empty, peaceful. A few birds hopped between low bushes, and the wind carried the faint smell of sweet desert sage. It was a quiet place for a difficult moment. "You're free to go anywhere you want," Jake said gently. "I won't stop you. But before you choose, I want to know something. Do you have a safe place to return to?" Ayanna looked toward the distant mountains. Her eyes took on a sorrowful, faraway expression. "I had a place," she said. "I do not know if I can return." Jake didn't push. He simply waited, letting the silence give her time to continue if she wished to. Ayanna looked down briefly, then lifted her gaze again. "My people live far from here. I was traveling with others when strangers found us. I was taken." Her words were calm, but filled with quiet weight. Jake felt a knot tighten in his chest. He didn't ask for details. He didn't need to. All he needed to know was that the journey back would not be simple. "I understand," he said softly. "If you want, I can help you travel. Not to lead you, just to walk with you until you feel safe." Ayanna studied him again, her dark eyes searching for anything false. She seemed to see only sincerity. At last, she nodded in acceptance. "We travel together. For now." Jake felt a light breath of relief. He wanted her to choose freely, and she had. They began to walk again. Jake let her set the pace. The desert stretched before them like a painted scene. Golden sand, tall dry grass, and distant purple mountains that rose like sleeping giants. The air grew warmer as the sun climbed higher. After a few minutes, Jake said, "There's water ahead, a small creek. We can stop and rest there." Ayanna nodded. She seemed to know the area well, glancing around with an awareness Jake admired. She walked gracefully, as if she belonged to the land and the land belonged to her. When they reached the creek, the water shimmered gently in the sunlight. Ayanna knelt beside it and touched the cool surface with her fingers, as if greeting an old friend. Jake tended to his horse, letting it drink. For a while they stayed in silence, both taking comfort in the calming sound of flowing water. After Ayanna drank, Jake offered her a piece of cornbread from his saddlebag. She looked at it politely, then accepted it with a quiet, "Thank you." She ate slowly, thoughtfully, as if savoring the simple moment of peace. Jake sat on a smooth rock nearby. "Dust Creek isn't always like that," he said, referring to the scene they had left behind. "Most folks there are good. What happened this morning, that wasn't right." Ayanna lifted her chin slightly. Wrong things happen, but we move forward. We learn. Jake admired her strength. She spoke with calm wisdom, yet he could sense the weariness beneath her words. "Do you know where you want to go first?" he asked. Ayana hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Toward the hills. There is a path my people use. It is safer than open land." Jake stood. "All right, we'll follow your lead." She seemed surprised. "You trust me to guide?" Jake smiled a little. "You've lived here longer than I have. You know the land better than anyone, and I'm not here to make decisions for you." Ayana looked at him for a long moment. It was as though she was seeing him in a new way, not as someone who had taken her from the stage, but as someone who was offering her control of her own direction. They began walking toward the hills. The landscape changed gradually. The ground became rockier, sprinkled with small wildflowers pushing bravely through the soil. The wind blew gently through tall yucca plants. Ayana walked a few steps ahead, moving with confident familiarity. Sometimes she would pause, place her hand on the ground, or study the horizon. Jake watched quietly, curious about her methods. She seemed to read the land like a map written by nature itself. After a long stretch of walking, Jake finally asked, "How do you always know where to go?" Ayana glanced over her shoulder. "The earth speaks. The sky speaks. The wind tells stories. My people listen." Jake nodded, trying to understand. "I guess I have some learning to do." Ayana's lips curved slightly, not quite a smile, but something close. "Everyone learns. The land teaches all who walk upon it." Their journey continued through the afternoon. They talked little, but the quiet between them was not uncomfortable. It felt natural, as if both knew words were not always needed. At one point, Ayana stopped at a large rock formation shaped like a half-opened hand. She touched one of the smooth stones and said, "My grandfather told me this place is a marker. It points toward fresh water." Jake raised his eyebrows. "Your grandfather sounds wise." She nodded slowly. "He taught me everything about living with the land. He said every plant, every stone, every breeze carries knowledge." Jake listened carefully. He found himself wanting to understand more about her world. Ayana turned to face him. Her expression was thoughtful. "Why did you help me today? You could have walked away." Jake looked at the ground for a moment before answering. "Because I've seen unfair things before, and my heart won't let me stand by when something's wrong. I'm no hero, Ayana. I just try to do what's right." Ayana studied him quietly. Then she said, "Many people see wrong things and walk away. You did not." Jake felt a warmth inside him at her words, though he didn't show it. "Maybe the world needs more people who step in quietly." Ayana looked toward the horizon again. Quiet strength is good strength. They continued walking until they reached a shaded grove where tall cottonwood trees rustled softly in the breeze. Their leaves shimmered like small silver coins when sunlight touched them. Jake glanced at the sky. "We can rest here a while." Ayana agreed. She sat beneath a tree while Jake made sure the horse was comfortable. The air was cool under the branches, and the grove smelled fresh and green. Ayana closed her eyes for a moment, listening to the wind moving through the leaves. She seemed grateful for the quiet. Jake sat across from her on the soft grass. "Do you think you'll be able to return to your people?" Ayana opened her eyes slowly. "I hope so. But sometimes, when someone is taken away, it becomes difficult to return without question. My people value honor. They protect their stories." Jake nodded gently. "If they need to hear your story, I'll walk with you to tell it." Ayana looked up at him with a deep, thoughtful expression. "Why would you do that?" "Because no one should have to face uncertain roads alone," Jake replied. Ayana looked down at her hands, then back at him. You are kind. Jake shook his head lightly. Just trying. The grove felt peaceful around them. Birds chirped softly from the branches. For a moment it seemed the world had paused to give them a bit of calm before whatever came next. Ayanna shifted slightly on the grass. We should keep moving before the sun gets low. Jake stood and offered her a small nod. Lead the way. As she walked ahead, the sunlight caught her hair, making it shine with warm copper highlights. She moved with the quiet confidence of someone who knew her purpose, even if the path ahead was uncertain. Jake followed with a steady step, feeling that their journey together was only just beginning. He didn't know what challenges or discoveries lay ahead. But he knew he would not let Ayanna face them without support. Together they moved toward the hills, two strangers joined by fate, now learning to trust the road, the land, and perhaps even each other. Jake and Ayanna moved deeper into the hills, where the land rose and fell like gentle waves frozen in time. Tall grasses brushed against their legs, and the warm afternoon light softened the world around them. Even though the land was peaceful, Jake sensed a quiet alertness in Ayanna. She looked around often, as if the wind carried messages only she could hear. For a long while, they walked without speaking. The silence between them was not cold. It was thoughtful. Jake felt he had stepped into a world that moved by different rules, where the earth itself had a voice. Ayanna, walking just ahead, moved with calm confidence, her steps light and sure. But as they reached the top of a sloping hill, Ayanna suddenly paused. Jake stopped behind her. Something wrong? Ayanna didn't answer right away. She tilted her head slightly, listening. The wind is different here, she said softly. It does not sound like it did before. Jake listened too. The breeze was gentle, carrying only the rustle of dry leaves and distant bird calls. To him, it sounded normal. What do you hear? He asked quietly. Ayanna closed her eyes for a moment. Sometimes silence tells a story. When the land grows still, it means something is close. Jake didn't doubt her. He had learned quickly that her senses were sharper than his. Close? Like danger? Ayanna opened her eyes and shook her head slowly. Not danger. Just something we should understand. Jake nodded. All right. We'll move carefully. They walked again, but more slowly. Ayanna observed every detail, the shape of footprints in the earth, the bend of grass, the pattern of birds flying overhead. Jake tried to see what she saw, but it was difficult. He admired how deeply connected she was to the land. After a while, the path narrowed between two tall rock walls. The stone rose high on either side, smooth and warm from the sun. The space was quiet, almost too quiet. Jake felt the air grow cooler as they entered. Ayanna stepped lightly, her gaze shifting back and forth. Suddenly, she touched the rock wall gently. Someone was here, she said. Jake looked closely. At first, he saw nothing, but then he noticed faint marks in the dust, a few footprints smoothed by wind. How long ago? Ayanna crouched to study them. Maybe early morning. Maybe late last night. Jake felt a small ripple of concern. Could it be travelers? Maybe, Ayanna said. Maybe the ones who brought us to Dust Creek passed this way. Jake felt his breath tighten, but he kept calm. He didn't want to alarm her. Are they close? Ayanna shook her head gently. I do not think so. The land would feel heavier. Jake understood her meaning without needing a full explanation. He trusted her instinct. She stood again and brushed her hands lightly. We should keep going, she said. The open land ahead will tell us more. They walked out from between the rock walls and into a wide, grassy valley. The sun shone brightly, and colorful wildflowers dotted the ground. The open space felt safer. Jake took a slow breath. Feels better out here? Ayanna nodded. The land breathes here. It feels calm. Jake smiled a little. You speak about the earth like it's alive. Ayanna turned to him with a gentle expression. In many ways, it is. Jake didn't fully understand, but he appreciated her view. As they walked, he studied the valley. A faint trail of dust rose far in the distance, but it was too far away to make sense of. Ayanna noticed Jake's glance. What do you see? She asked. Something moving out there, Jake said. Could be anything, could be nothing. Ayanna squinted toward the distant spot, but didn't seem troubled. If it comes closer, the wind will change. They continued downhill until they reached a small grove of juniper trees. The cool shade made it a good place to rest. Ayanna knelt to gather some berries from a nearby bush. She inspected them carefully, choosing only the ripe ones. These are good to eat, she said. She offered a few to Jake. He tasted one. It was sweet, with a hint of pine. You really know this land well, he said. Ayanna nodded modestly. My people teach us to listen. When we listen, we cannot get lost. Jake admired that. I've been lost more times than I'd like to admit. She looked at him with gentle amusement. You are learning. That is enough. Jake chuckled softly. I hope so. After they rested, they continued up a gentle slope toward higher ground. The hilltop gave a wide view of the valley behind them. Jake looked back and noticed that the faint dust cloud he had seen earlier was now gone. Must have been nothing, he said. Ayanna nodded, though her eyes remained thoughtful. Sometimes the land hides things until it is ready to show them. Jake didn't know what that meant exactly. But he did know that Ayanna chose her words with purpose. They started down the other side of the hill. The path was covered in smooth stones that clicked softly under their feet. Ayanna slowed suddenly and knelt again. Jake moved beside her. Footprints? Yes, she said quietly. Fresh ones. But not many. Jake felt his heart beat a little faster. Someone passed here recently? Ayanna examined the ground. Yes, maybe one or two people, but their steps are slow, not hurried. Jake relaxed a bit. Slow steps meant the travelers were not chasing anything. Probably just people moving through the hills on their own business. Ayanna stood. We should not worry, but we should stay aware. Jake nodded. As they walked on, the land began to shift again. The earth rose gently into a wide plateau. From there, the sky seemed enormous, stretching above them like a painting without edges. The wind carried the faint scent of sage and wild mint. Ayanna stopped again, not with fear, but with curiosity. Do you feel that? She asked. Jake paused. Feel what? The air, she said. It is softer here. It means there is water nearby. Jake listened to the wind. He didn't feel anything different, but he trusted her completely. They followed the invisible path she sensed until they reached a small pool nestled between stones. The water sparkled like glass. Ayanna knelt beside it. This place is good. We can rest here again. Jake let the horse drink while he filled his hands with cool water. The moment felt peaceful, almost magical. Ayanna sat by the pool, dipping her fingertips into the water. My people believe places like this are gifts, she said. They help travelers continue. Jake sat near her. We needed a gift like this today. Ayanna nodded. Yes, the path has been heavy. Jake didn't want to cause her worry. If anything is frightening you, you can tell me. Ayanna shook her head gently. I am not frightened. I am watching. The land speaks quietly when change is near. Jake absorbed her words slowly. Change? Ayanna touched the surface of the water, watching the ripples spread outward. Something is moving around us. Not harm, just movement. The world is shifting, and we are walking through it. Jake thought about that. It sounded poetic, yet true. Their journey already felt like something greater than a simple walk through the hills. They rested until the sun began to dip, its light turning warm and orange. Ayana stood and brushed off her dress. "We should move before the shadows grow long," she said. "Night can confuse the path." Jake stood too. "Lead the way." As they walked again, the earth under their feet felt cooler. The sky deepened in color. Birds flew homeward, and the breeze whispered through tall grasses. Ayana walked with purpose, but her eyes drifted to the horizon often. Jake knew she felt something coming, something she could sense but not yet see. Eventually, they reached a ridge overlooking a wide plain. Ayana stopped and looked across the land carefully. "There," she said softly. Jake followed her gaze. Far below, near a distant grove of trees, he saw a few tiny shapes moving. They were barely dots from where he stood. "Travelers?" he asked. "Maybe," Ayana replied. "But they walk calmly. They are not looking for us." Jake felt relieved. The tiny shapes continued across the plain, minding their own path. Ayana exhaled softly. The world is full of people on their own journeys. Sometimes paths cross. Sometimes they only pass like shadows. Jake nodded. "As long as they keep going their way and we keep going ours, we'll be fine." Ayana turned to him. "Yes, but we must stay aware. The land brings messages in many forms." Jake smiled gently. "And I'll rely on you to translate them." Ayana gave him a calm, almost warm look. Something soft passed between them, unspoken, but comforting. They continued walking as twilight settled over the hills. The path felt quieter, the sky wider, the world gentler. Whatever movement Ayana had sensed earlier no longer felt close. The land seemed to breathe again. As they found a safe place to settle for the night, Jake realized something important. He trusted Ayana completely, her senses, her wisdom, her strength. And though the road ahead was uncertain, he felt sure they would face it together with steady hearts and open eyes. Their journey was still unfolding, and part of him felt the next day would bring new discoveries neither of them expected. Jake and Ayana woke to the soft glow of morning light spreading across the hills. The air felt cool and gentle, as if the world wanted to give them a peaceful start. Birds were already singing from nearby trees, creating a quiet melody that made the early hour feel warm and welcoming. Ayana opened her eyes first. She sat quietly for a moment, listening to the sounds around them. Her senses were always alert, even when she rested. Jake admired that about her. He stretched slowly, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. "Morning," Jake said with a soft smile. Ayana nodded. "Morning." The simple exchange felt warm, like two travelers slowly becoming comfortable in each other's presence. They packed their small belongings and prepared to continue their journey. The sun rose higher, touching the hills with golden light. Ayana stood at the edge of the ridge, studying the land ahead. "Today will be important," she said quietly. Jake stepped beside her. "How do you know?" Ayana took a slow breath. "The land feels bright today. When the world shines like this, it means change is near." Jake didn't fully understand, but he trusted her completely. "Then let's walk toward that change," he said. Ayana gave him a soft, thoughtful look, then began walking down the gentle slope. Jake followed closely. The path led them through a valley full of tall grasses waving in the breeze. Tiny yellow flowers dotted the ground, dancing lightly with each gust of wind. The air smelled fresh and sweet. Jake felt calm, but Ayana seemed deep in thought. "Something on your mind?" he asked. Ayana hesitated, then answered honestly. "I am thinking of my people. I wonder what they will think when they see me again." Jake nodded slowly. "It's natural to worry, but whatever you face, you won't face it alone." Ayana paused, looking at him carefully. Why do you say that with such certainty? Jake shrugged softly. Because I've walked this far with you. I'm not turning back now. Ayana held his gaze for a long moment. Her expression softened, touched by his loyalty. She didn't speak, but Jake felt she understood the promise in his words. They continued their walk, and soon the valley opened into a long, winding trail bordered by rocky ridges. The rocks glowed in warm colors, reds, oranges, and soft browns. Ayana moved with purpose, her steps steady and sure. As they crossed a narrow bend in the trail, the sound of distant voices drifted through the air. Jake stopped, alert. Do you hear that? Ayana listened carefully. Yes, but the voices are calm. They are talking, not shouting. Jake relaxed slightly. Could be travelers resting nearby. Ayana nodded. We will not go near them. We will walk around. Jake agreed. They took a longer, quieter route behind a large rock formation. Jake watched Ayana lead the way, impressed by how smoothly she navigated the land. Once they passed the area safely, Jake said softly, "You're good at this." Ayana smiled faintly. I learned from my elders. They teach us to walk gently in the world. Jake nodded. Your world holds a lot more wisdom than mine. You learn quickly, Ayana replied. That is good wisdom, too. They continued walking until midday, where the sun sat high above them. The light was warm, but a soft wind kept them cool. Let's rest in the shade, Jake suggested. Ayana agreed. They found a quiet patch under a tall cottonwood tree. The leaves shimmered like tiny silver mirrors in the sunlight. Jake sat down and leaned his back against the trunk. Feels good to stop for a moment. Ayana sat near him, drawing slow circles in the dirt with a small stick. The earth here is soft, she said thoughtfully. What does that mean? Jake asked, curious. It means the land is gentle, Ayana answered. Places like this bring calmness. When the earth is soft, the heart grows soft too. Jake looked up at her. Is your heart growing soft? Ayana didn't answer right away. Instead, she glanced at him with eyes full of quiet emotion. Perhaps, she said softly. Jake felt warmth rising in his chest. He didn't speak, not wanting to interrupt the quiet moment. After resting, they began walking again. The land slowly rose, leading them toward a cluster of hills that looked almost like folded blankets of earth. As they climbed higher, the path narrowed. Jake stayed close to Ayana, watching her balance easily on uneven rocks. He admired her skill, but he also wanted to be ready if she needed help. At one point, Ayana paused to look at a strange formation of stones. They were arranged neatly in a small circle. What's that? Jake asked. A sign, Ayana said. My people leave markers like this. It means travelers passed here and wished blessings for the next who walk this way. Jake touched one of the stones gently. Then this must be a safe path. Yes, Ayana said, a good path. They continued walking, following the trail marked by her people. The land felt welcoming and the breeze carried a soft, comforting sound. After a while, Jake said, Ayana, when we reach your people, I want to do right by you. Ayana slowed her steps. What do you mean? Jake took a small breath. I mean, I don't want them to misunderstand anything. I didn't take you from that stage. I didn't treat you as anything but free. I want them to see you exactly as you are. Strong, wise, independent. Ayana looked at him with gentle surprise. You think of these things? All the time, Jake admitted. Ayana turned her face away for a moment. When she looked back, her expression was soft and full of gratitude. It matters to me that you think with your heart. Not many do. Jake felt warmth in his chest. They continued on, passing through a small grove of cedar trees. The scent was rich and calming. As they walked, Jake noticed Ayanna becoming quieter than usual. "Something wrong?" he asked gently. Ayanna shook her head slowly. "Not wrong. Just thinking. My people may ask many questions. They may wonder how I survived. They may even question who helped me." Jake understood. "Then I'll stand beside you while you answer them. Quietly, respectfully." Ayanna breathed out softly. "You are steady, like the earth." Jake chuckled. "That's one of the nicest things anyone's ever said to me." Ayanna smiled, small but real. As the afternoon stretched on, the trail led them to a high ridge overlooking a vast valley filled with green shrubs, winding paths, and distant mountains. Ayanna's steps slowed. "Jake." He turned. "Yeah?" "This is near the place where my people travel. We are close now." Jake's heart tightened slightly. "How do you feel?" Ayanna took a slow breath. "Unsure, but also hopeful." Jake nodded. "Hope is good." Ayanna looked at him deeply. "Jake, if my people ask how you and I walked together, what will you say?" Jake answered without hesitation. "I'll say we walked with respect. I'll say we walked as equals." Ayanna's eyes grew soft and warm. "That is the truth." They walked down into the valley, where the air felt cool and full of promise. The dust under their feet rose gently with each step. The world seemed to slow around them, as if waiting for something important to happen. Ayanna turned to Jake once more. "If they ask why you helped me, what will you tell them?" Jake looked at her with calm honesty. "I'll tell them I helped you because it was the right thing, and because I cared." Ayanna's breath caught slightly, though she tried to hide it. "Cared?" Jake nodded. "Yes." Ayanna touched her fingertips to her chest, as if steadying her heart. "Then I will tell them the same." They continued walking, side by side now, not one leading, the other following, but moving together with equal steps. The valley ahead glowed with soft evening light. Every part of it felt full of expectation, as if their journey was gently guiding them toward a new beginning. Jake felt it too. Something in the air had changed. Tomorrow would bring answers. Tomorrow would bring Ayanna's people. Tomorrow would bring decisions. But tonight, as they walked peacefully through the golden light, Jake and Ayanna understood that whatever came next, they would face it together. Jake and Ayanna walked into the valley together, the evening sun stretching long shadows across the land. The air felt calm, as if holding a quiet promise. Ayanna's steps grew slower as they moved farther into the open space. She lifted her head and breathed in deeply. "My people walk this land," she whispered. "I can feel them." Jake looked around, though nothing was visible yet but rolling hills and tall grass. "How far away do you think they are?" "Not far," Ayanna said softly. "The air carries the scent of cedar. My people burn cedar when they prepare to welcome travelers." Jake inhaled, trying to catch the same scent. After a moment, he smiled gently. "I smell it too." Ayanna's eyes warmed. "Then we are close to the place where paths meet." They walked on, their steps slow but steady. The land was peaceful, so peaceful that it felt almost like a living thing offering comfort. Ayanna moved with grace, but Jake could sense a quiet nervousness inside her, like a bird preparing to take flight. Jake walked closer. "If you start feeling unsure, just look at me," he said softly. "I'll be right here." Ayanna looked at him with a gentle expression full of gratitude. "I know." As they reached a small hill, Ayanna suddenly stopped. She lifted her hand, signaling Jake to pause. Her eyes focused on the horizon, where a faint movement shifted among the trees. Jake squinted, trying to see what she saw. Slowly, shapes began to appear, soft outlines of people standing still, watching. Jake's breath caught. "Is that My people, Ayanna said, her voice steady but full of emotion. The figures stood quietly, waiting. They were far enough not to startle, yet close enough to show they had been expecting someone. Jake felt his heart beat faster. He didn't know what reception awaited Ayanna. He hoped it would be gentle. Ayanna turned to him. "Stay here for a moment." Jake nodded. "Whatever you need." Ayanna stepped forward alone, her posture tall and graceful. Jake watched with deep respect as she continued toward the waiting figures. The closer she came, the more clearly he could see their clothing. Woven patterns, soft colors, familiar to her heritage. They stood with calm dignity, not rushing forward, not backing away. Jake stayed where she'd asked him to stand. He wanted her to meet them on her own terms, without pressure. He folded his hands quietly and let the moment unfold. As Ayanna approached her people, a woman from the group stepped forward, a mature woman with gentle eyes and long braided hair. Ayanna paused, and the woman touched a hand to her heart. Jake could not hear their words, but he could feel their emotion in the air. Ayanna bowed her head slightly, speaking softly. The woman reached out, brushing Ayanna's arm with a comforting hand. Jake watched from a distance as Ayanna spoke with them, first quietly, then with more confidence. A few people stepped closer, listening to her story. Some nodded, others looked thoughtful. A child peeked from behind an elder's leg, curious about the traveler in the distance. After what felt like a long but peaceful time, Ayanna turned and gestured gently for Jake to come. Jake took a slow breath and walked forward. His boots felt heavier than usual, but his heart stayed steady. When he reached Ayanna's side, she looked up at him with a soft smile, small but hopeful. "This is Jake," Ayanna said to her people. "He helped me walk safely on my journey." The woman who had first greeted Ayanna stepped toward him. Jake lowered his head respectfully. "Welcome," she said softly. Her voice had a warm, musical tone. "Ayanna speaks of you with gratitude." Jake nodded. "I only did what was right." The woman studied him for a moment, openly but kindly. Walking beside someone through the unknown is no small thing. It shows the heart. Jake felt humbled by her words. "Ayanna guided us both," he said gently. "She showed me the land in ways I never knew." Ayanna's people nodded, their expressions softening. Jake felt a quiet acceptance forming in the space between them. It was not loud or dramatic. It was sincere, like the land itself. Ayanna touched Jake's arm lightly. "Will you walk with me a little longer?" she asked. Jake smiled. "As long as you want." Ayanna led him toward a small circle of stones where her people had set up a peaceful rest area. Blankets were laid out neatly, and small bundles of herbs hung from a branch to dry. The air smelled of earth, cedar, and warm evening breeze. Ayanna sat down on a blanket and motioned for Jake to sit beside her. He lowered himself carefully, feeling honored to be invited into such a sacred space. The woman who had greeted Ayanna placed a small bowl of tea between them. The aroma was soothing, soft, warm, comforting. Ayanna lifted the bowl and offered it to Jake first. "Drink." He accepted it carefully. "What is it?" "A tea of calmness," she said. "It helps the heart rest and understand what it feels." Jake took a small sip. The flavor was gentle, slightly sweet with a hint of earthiness. It warmed his chest in a comforting way. Ayanna watched him with thoughtful eyes. "There is something I must speak," she said softly. Jake placed the bowl down gently. "I'm listening." Ayanna looked at the sky, where the sun was slowly sinking behind the hills. The colors were soft and glowing, orange, gold, lavender. "My people asked what happened, and I told them everything. They asked who walked with me, and I told them your name." Jake waited patiently. Ayanna turned back to him. "They asked why you helped me. I told them you helped because your heart is honest. Jake felt his throat tighten slightly. I'm glad you said that. Ayanna took a slow breath. Then they asked something else. They asked what I wish to do now, where I wish to go, who I wish to walk beside. Jake's heart beat a little faster. And what did you tell them? Ayanna looked at him deeply, her eyes filled with gentle certainty. I told them I wished to choose my own path, and that path is with you. Jake froze, surprised by the calm strength in her words. With me? Ayanna nodded. You treated me with respect. You let me choose my steps. You cared for my safety without taking my freedom. My people value that, and so do I. Jake's voice softened. Ayanna, I care about you more than I can explain. Ayanna reached out and placed her hand lightly over his, calm, steady, warm. I know, and I care too. They sat quietly like that for a moment, feeling the world settle around them. Then Ayanna spoke again, her voice gentle but clear. My people say that when two hearts walk the same road with honesty, they may choose to join their paths. Jake looked at her slowly, as if making sure he heard correctly. Ayanna, are you saying? I am saying that I choose you, she whispered. Not because of what happened, not because I owe anything, but because we walked through the unknown together, and my heart grew soft toward you. Jake felt emotions swell inside him, warm, full, peaceful. Ayanna, I choose you too, with all of my heart. Ayanna smiled, small but beautiful, like dawn breaking over a quiet valley. Her people nodded gently, accepting her choice. That evening, under the soft, fading light, Ayanna's people prepared a small ceremony, not grand or loud, but gentle and meaningful. It celebrated two travelers who had walked with respect, courage, and quiet trust. Ayanna stood beside Jake, her hand resting lightly in his. Their eyes met, and a peaceful understanding passed between them. They had found something rare, not just companionship, but a deep connection built on kindness and choice. As the ceremony ended, Ayanna whispered, Tomorrow, we begin a new journey. Jake smiled. Together. They sat beside the fire long after the sun set, talking softly, laughing gently at moments from their travels, and sharing quiet thoughts about the future. Above them, the stars shone bright, like small lanterns guiding them toward a life shaped by trust, respect, and warm companionship. And in that peaceful valley, surrounded by acceptance and soft night wind, Jake and Ayanna knew something clearly. Their journey had not just brought them together. It had given them a future built from gentle steps, honest hearts, and a love born from true choice.